Retired Nigerian lawyer and regular commentator Dele Farotimi is in the city of Ibadan and joins us now via Zoom to share his thoughts about this visit. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The United States and Nigeria, much like the US and Kenya in East Africa, have enjoyed a long relationship over the years.
Yes, we have. But the question is, what kind of relationship has it been and to whose benefit, for whose benefit?
Well, tell us.
Well, as far as I can tell, Nigeria needs all the friends that it can get at this time. And we are always and should always be welcoming of everyone who comes to us with goodwill. And it is the hope that Mr. Blinken has come with similar goodwill. But we recall that before the inauguration of President Biden, in the immediate aftermath of the massacre that took place at Lekki, Mr. Biden was quite vociferous in calling for openness, in calling for investigations, in demanding that the right of protesters be respected. We are hoping that Mr. Antony Blinken found the time, or has found the time in his visit, to reiterate these messages to the Nigerian regime of General Buhari. It is one thing for an American president to be in office and say one thing, and it's usually been quite another thing when they come out of power to say quite another. And that is not particularly unique to the United States. I was fortunate enough to be watching Mr. Gordon Brown today, waxing lyrical about COVID vaccine inequity. And I recall that when he was the prime minister in Britain, there were things he could have done then that he's busy preaching now that he did not do at the time. So we just hope that the American president, represented by Mr. Blinken, remember to remind the Nigerian regime that Nigeria is a democracy. At least it pretends to be one. And that they have reminded the Nigerian regime of its responsibilities as a democracy to be open in its dealing with the citizens of Nigeria.
It is interesting.
We're not holding our breath, but we watch.
It is interesting. A day before Blinken arrives in Nigeria, Washington removed Nigeria from its list of countries with religious freedom concerns. It sounds as if they're bending over backwards to try and create a space for something.
Well, it is actually quite naive for Africans to imagine that our interest is ever paramount when the West or any other part of the world is taking decisions relating to our affairs. It has always been about the enlightened and sometimes quite unenlightened selfish interest of the rest of the world in relation to the African. We're in a race, but we rarely ever seem to remember. So let me deal with the question. Mr. Trump, for reasons best known to him, perhaps to play to his own evangelical base, placed Nigeria in 2020 on the list of those countries where religious freedom is repressed. Is a function of fact that in Nigeria, everybody's rights are generally repressed. But it has been particularly harrowing for religious minorities in the northern part of Nigeria, where their repression is not a matter of argument, is a subject of facts. What the Biden regime, the democratic regime, has seen that has changed in the last 1 year is known only to them. And the criteria used by the Trump regime is also only known to them. So I would prefer to say that it is up to we, Nigerians, to actually set the parameters of our engagement with the rest of the world, not only America, but with the rest of the world. We need to identify what our interests are. America has identified what his interests are. Today, the same America stayed 20 years in Afghanistan and left. Nigeria is heading towards Afghanistan, and I'm not too sure they're too bothered by our journey, as long as they can keep the implosion within the Nigerian space and we don't create any refugee problem. I'm not too sure America or the rest of the world cares too much about what we do with ourselves, provided we don't create a mess. Because I really don't know what has changed in the last 1 year to justify the removal. And I really didn't know, even at the time of the inclusion, precisely what the parameters were. So it's always about Americans' selfish interest, not about the African, Nigerian interest.
All right. So on the one hand, the United States is Nigeria's biggest trading partner. So there's obvious business interest for Nigeria. But when we look at the reverse, what possibly could be in it for the United States?
Look, Nigeria is the largest market in Africa. However much the rulers of Nigeria, as it is with practically every other African country, might care to seek to impoverish the people, we're still a rather large economic destination. Taking that aside, you also have to weigh the impact a crumbled Nigeria would have on the West African sub-region and the African continent as a whole, the immense refugee problems that might arise from any implosion in Nigeria. So what I have seen is that as long as the West can find justification for its trade with us, they don't really care too much about what we do with ourselves. The Americans have demonstrated, not just the Americans, practically every part of the West have demonstrated immense capacity at telling exactly what we are doing in our country. So when you find situations where almost every Western power in Nigeria have managed to turn a blind eye to what they saw on the evening of the 20th of October in Nigeria, and they are providing every avenue to normalize because they don't want the refugee problems from Nigeria. And we ourselves have not demonstrated a desire to do things differently as a people. So what you find constantly is that different standards are used for engagement, not just with Nigeria, but even with South Africa and every other part of Africa. The hypocrisy, the crass hypocrisy of the multiple standards by which if you accuse the African of stealing, of corruption, the curious thing is that these monies are never ever kept in our continent. They're taken outside our continent. They buy homes on the Potomac. They buy homes all over the world. But the wealth is taken from our continent. So it might not be the proper venue to have this discussion, but let's be clear about something. There are no altruistic interests here. Is about the purity of the selfish interest of the West, not just America. At any point in time, as long as they can do their businesses, they will turn a blind eye to the atrocities that happens in our space. It's entirely up to us to find our own way out of the mess in which we are. Those who used to once romantically look to the West for salvation, I'm sure by now people are having their eyes opened. They don't care about us. It's all about the trade. And yes, we're a big market.
Yeah. So the United States and the West have got their own self-interest in terms of endearing themselves to Abuja. Is there any political capital that President Buhari could get out of this visit at all? Because he has faced quite a lot of criticism at home.
Look, criticisms matter in democracies. The only reason I can sit here and be speaking to you as I am is because the Nigerian regime has to pretend to be a democracy. But words don't necessarily matter. You have to check the content of the word. The Nigerian democracy is one in which armed soldiers can turn their guns on unarmed anthem singing, national anthem singing, flag waving civilians. and it's a democracy. So a Nigerian democracy is one in which you can clamp a peaceful protester in jail for over a year and then turn around in the 13th month with a DPP advice saying that he could only have been sent to prison for a month if he had ever been convicted of the offense, the only offense you could have charged him with. So we have all sorts of names that we give to things in my country which do not necessarily mean what they are meant to mean. So essentially, in Nigeria, the way we have, the president has for him, it's a PR coup. What America has done is to endorse the obvious insanity of the Nigerian space, but it's nothing new. It's always about American interest. If we, as Nigerians, seek to see a movement in the need of our relationship with the rest of the world, we're the ones who would have to define exactly what our national interests are within the context of true national interest and not the selfish interest of leaders or rulers, I should say. So basically, all they've done is to hand a PR coup to a most fascist regime. That's what it is.
Mm. And perhaps finally, when he was in Kenya, security in the region became one of the subject issues. I wonder if security will come up in their conversations. Nigeria going through challenges with insurgents and the northern part of the continent going towards more to the west. Generally, there's been insurgents across the region. And I just wonder, is this something that the United States will bring up for fear that it might spread to areas of interest for them?
Look, I, frankly speaking, do not place too much hope on anything the Americans might do in Africa, because what we saw in Afghanistan is sufficient proof of the extent to which America is prepared to go and just how far it will not go in the new realities of today's world. The Horn of Africa is breaking apart, and it's obvious that there is a need for world attention. But more importantly, I think Africans ourselves, we need to pay more attention to finding peace, consciously finding peace within our continent, because as you rightly pointed out, the only thing that might interest the rest of the world when it comes to Africa is to ensure the capacity to continue to exert their powers and to continue taking what is of economic benefit to them is extractive. But it is we who live in our own lands who have to find a way to make these lands habitable for ourselves and for our children. He will come to Nigeria as he has, and yes, they will speak about security as they would, but the point is this: every part of Nigeria is experiencing one security challenge or the other. But the bulk of the security challenges in Nigeria are directly traceable to the excesses of the government in power. If you look to the northwest of Nigeria, where the Boko Haram insurgent is running riot, what you'll find very quickly is that where you used to have ragtag armies of Boko Haram fighters who pillage the countryside, cover it up with religiosity, now you have hardcore ISWAP fighters coming to the northwest. In the northeast. In the northwest, what used to be bands of Fulani raiders have morphed. So you now have situations where what the state had mollycoddled for some time, pretended not to see, refused to designate properly as terrorism, has morphed, and today is become full-scale insurgency in the northeast, in the northwest, in the north central. They would like to characterize it as some issue of climate change. But the fact remains that you're not talking about pastoralist farmers clash. No, this is systemic. In a state, Benue, for instance, you have over 2 million internally displaced persons. So yes, America will come and he will talk about making peace, security, and all of that. But at the end of the day, Nigeria just is in the process of purchasing, I believe, 12 Cobra attack helicopters from America. Question is this: would those attack helicopters be deployed in the northeast, the northwest, where banditry, or shall I say terrorism, is raging, or would they be deployed in the southeast, where there is a legitimate demand for national equity by the Igbo peoples? Would we continue to find situations where a refusal to give justice to people who are demanding equity in the country are disguised as an attempt to bring peace to a place, and then you brand self-determination activists, you brand them as terrorists, and then you look at the terrorists and you call them businessmen, you call them vandals, you call them everything but what they are. And then you take the self-determination activists, you take the human rights activists, somebody like Wole Sowore, for instance, and you clamp him in jail. And then after months of keeping him in jail, he's out on a bail that has restricted him to a city. He's a family man, and we're still in a democracy. So when Mr. Blinken comes around and is busy preaching the mantra of security and all of that, he would do well to remember to tell Mr. Buhari, or shall I say General Buhari, that justice is actually the first condition for peace. And when you refuse to give justice, there is likely to be a multiplicity of strife, because the bulk of the strife in Nigeria arises directly from a failure to give justice.
Mr. Farotimi, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for joining us, and your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.